It started Evolution of the Brain and Behavior, Chapter 6. Modern scientists see the study of the change of life over the ages due to natural selection and sexual selection as beneficial to understanding humanity from more than just its current snapshot view. This can be done through DNA analysis, where scientists compare the DNA of one species with another. For example, we know that the DNA of chimpanzees only differs from the human DNA by 1.6%, which isn't a whole lot. And there you go. There's our closest relatives, the common chimpanzee, the pygmy chimpanzee. Another name for the pygmy chimpanzee is bonobo. Then there's humans and gorillas. We're all pretty close. Scientists had been toying with the idea of evolution for a couple of centuries before Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace published their findings in 1858. Darwin actually published first, though he had been working on the theory for almost 30 years. In 1859, Darwin published On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Darwin made three main observations. Individuals of a given species are not identical. Some of the variations is inheritable, and not all offspring will survive. Darwin would later add a fourth corollary, that of sexual selection. Sexual selection states that each sex exerts selective pressures on the other in terms of both anatomical and behavioral features that favor reproductive success. Hence the strange anatomical features of some creatures, such as peacocks, who have tails that are so large they can barely fly, or mandrills, who have very interesting colored facial features. Not only that, but their reproductive area is also quite colorful. And cardinals, you can see a cardinal flying toward you from a mile away, literally from a mile away, because they are so bright red. If there is the males anyway, and the females are actually brown if you've ever seen them. But as far as camouflage is concerned, there's no camouflage here, there's no camouflage here, and there's certainly no camouflage here. Do humans participate in sexual selection? Well, we do some strange things to our bodies. These are Brazilian women. They think beauty is in the size of your lower lip. These are Chinese women. Chinese used to bind women's feet, and as you can see, they deformed the feet to make them as tiny and delicate as possible. This is the flathead. Actually, the flathead. There have been indigenous people in the Americas who have changed the shape of their skull to make them more attractive. These people were in the Northwest, and these are pictures from the Lewis and Clark expedition, where they've actually flattened their heads. In South America, you saw the same thing in the hierarchy, the monarchy of the area. They would shape the skull when they were children and make them interesting shapes. I saw one down in Peru that was shaped like a heart, an individual's skull, and of course the flat forehead was also very popular down there. Of course, white people aren't immune to to the desire to change yourself so that you look more attractive. This is a woman who wears a corset, tightened so tight that it crushes. It actually pushes her rib cage up and moves her organs either above her waist or below her waist to make herself look more attractive. Scarification, of course. This is an individual from Africa. These are both adult males. This is an individual that we used to call pygmies. I'm not exactly sure what they're referring to individuals anymore who are that short, but this is a Cherokee from Oklahoma, and they were working on the same farm in Oklahoma. So you can see that one is almost half the size of the other. Tattoos, of course. This is a individual from New Zealand. He's a Maori or a Maori. There's a lot of different pronunciations. These women felt that the larger your ears, the more attractive it is. And as you can see, they had weights on their ears to elongate the their ears. And these are Thai um, mountain women who elongated their necks in order to make themselves more attractive. Um, what this actually does, they thought that it lengthened the neck. Doesn't actually lengthen the neck. What it does is it pushes down your clavicle, so it compresses it down into the rib cage. So they don't actually lengthen their neck. These are Maasai. The Maasai feel that the higher you can jump, the more attractive you are to the opposite sex. And it's actually part of a sexual selection ritual that they have. And these are from the Saharan desert. These individuals feel that these are all males, by the way, and the more things you can do with your eyes, the more attractive you are. And they paint themselves. It's really kind of interesting. And there you go. People in the United States, aren't we interesting? And all those piercings make this person so much more attractive. There you go. I don't have them. Okay. I guess that's another class. Understanding the phylogeny of species allows us to study the behavioral and neural adaptations that allows animals to exploit particular ecological niches. Comparative studies may focus on specific differences between closely related species or may be concerned with general principles across larger numbers of species, but in each case, the use of an evolutionary framework provides additional explanatory power. And there's the classifications that we were talking about. The principles of neural function revealed by comparative anatomy studies may often be generalized to many species, including humans. The major divisions of the brain are shared by all vertebrates. Brain differences between species of vertebrates can often be directly related to their ecology and behavioral complexity. And of course, that's what we're looking at here. There's a cat, a monkey, a rat, and a human. They all have exactly the same brain structures. It's just in a different configuration. Such differences tend to be quantitative in nature. Relative size of brain regions or the size of neurons is a good example. The field of classifying animals is known as taxonomy. Taxonomy is an ongoing endeavor. Taxonomy can be done in many ways, including paleontology, study of fossil remains, comparing animal DNA with human DNA, putting paleontological information with DNA analysis in a study called convergent evolution. Two of the fastest swimmers in the ocean are tuna and dolphin. tuna and dolphins each evolved for efficient swimming, and so there are similarities in their structure. However, the dolphin is a mammal and the tuna is a fish. Similar features due to convergent evolution is called homoplasy, similar development. They, they both got fins to control. They have dorsal fins, dorsal fins. Their tails are aimed in a different direction. Homology, study of similarities, looks at similarities between body structures of animals with common ancestry. A good example of homology is the forelimb of several mammals. Outwardly, they seem so different, but the structure is very similar. Analogy refers to two structures that have similar function. And this is a human with your three major bones. This is the dog, and he's got exactly the same thing. And this is a seal's flipper, and they have exactly the same thing. And a bat's wing, and they, of course, have the same structure. And these are the phalanges, the fingers. These are the fingers. These are the fingers, and these are the fingers. Classification of species begins in general terms and runs to more and more specific. Kingdom is the most general term. Living creatures are broken into 5 kingdoms: Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Monera, which is a bacteria, and Protista, which are single-celled animals. The main subdivision of the kingdom is the phylum. 3 phyla are Chordata, Mollusca, and Arthropoda. And we, of course, are Chordata. Because we have a spinal cord. The main subdivision of a phylum is a class. Some classes within the phylum: Chordata, Mammalia, Aves, and Reptilia. Mammalia, of course, are mammals, Aves are birds, and Reptilia are reptiles. The main subdivision of the class is an order. Some orders within the class: Mammalia, Carnivora, Herbivora, and Primates. And of course, we are primates. Herbivores are are animals that eat plants exclusively, and carnivora are animals that eat meat exclusively. The main subdivision of the order is the family, such as Canidae and Felidae. Canidae are dogs, and Felidae are cats. The main subdivision of a family is the genus, such as Canis and Vulpes. Canis are dogs, and Vulpes are foxes. The main subdivision of the genus is the species, such as Canis familiaris, and that is the domestic dog. While Darwin's theory was widely accepted, no one really knew or understood how change took place until biologist Hugo de Vries. Now remember, Darwin didn't publish until 1859. So what were people thinking before 1859? Well, they didn't really understand how things worked. And that's fairly common. We have to educate ourselves with new information on a fairly continuous basis. And there were a lot of people that wanted to argue with Darwin, especially religious leaders. But with time, we understand what's going on. Just like we understand that the earth is not flat, even though there are still people out there. There are still people in today's world that think of the earth as flat. And these people are known as the Flat Earth Society. Is it a joke? The answer is no, it's not a joke. These people can't see it, so they don't accept it. Working with primroses, de Vries proved that sudden changes were caused spontaneously by mutations. And of course, that's what we're always looking for in science, is change. How something has changed. Genetic studies subsequently demonstrated that chromosomes provided the building blocks of inheritance. Later, genes were identified as the building blocks of chromosomes. Watson and Crick demonstrated that DNA was arranged in a double helix made up of nucleic acid. Now, this is really kind of interesting because I was born in 1949. In 1949, the DNA was not a theory yet. It wasn't until the 1950s that Watson and Crick uh, came together and realized what they had. But of course, we had no way of seeing it because we didn't have any microscopes that were powerful enough to see DNA. But this is what DNA actually looks like. That's from an electron microscope. We had to figure this out. And we didn't have electron microscopes until the late 60s. So we've got electron microscopes and we have this theory, so now we have to prove that the theory is correct. And that's one of the things that an individual that I ran track with, that's one of the things that he did. He started looking at DNA from a fruit fly, as weird as that is. And from his research and from Watson and Crick, we understand DNA does exist. They are the structure of chromosomes and genes. And now we need to figure out how it works. So one of the first things that we did was try to map the entire DNA structure. Of course, there was this huge argument at the time that humans and chimpanzees were not really that related, and people would get very upset. As a matter of fact, there are some states, Kansas, where if you teach evolution, then you can get arrested, just like back in the 1920s. So there are still people out there that contend that religion should be stronger than science, and actually, the current administration supports that. The idea that science is not absolute, and it's not. It's certainly not, but it's certainly closer than pretending that not understanding how all this stuff works. At least science is trying to figure it out. Today, the modern genome. So this is what one of the things we were trying to do. We were trying to map the genome. The fascinating thing is that we have not only mapped the genome of humans, of course, but we have mapped the genome of many animals, including animals that are dead or that are extinct, such as Neanderthal man. We have mapped the DNA of Neanderthal man, which is not easy because where did we get their cells? We got their cells from the teeth of fossils that were still intact. Not the easiest thing in the world. And of course, when we look at one sample, if we looked at you and then we looked at me, we would see a difference between the two. Not a very great difference, but we would see some degree of difference. So if they just looked at my DNA and didn't look at your DNA, they would say, well, this is what DNA always looks like, 100%. And the reality is that 0.1% that is the difference between your DNA and my DNA wouldn't be expressed because they wouldn't have done your DNA. So they wouldn't have been able to find the fact. If I had the only modern DNA specimen, they would see that as an absolute, and they wouldn't really they would have to compare it with other DNA to see that it was an absolute. I hope that makes sense. And that's one of the problems we have with Neanderthals. We have all these examples. Well, we've only been able to get DNA out of a small number of samples. And we've compared those DNA studies, and there have been differences. But what we are actually looking at, we can't figure out why did Neanderthal man die out? Why is he extinct today? And the answer is, he's not. Neanderthal man isn't extinct. Neanderthal man still exists in us. Probably me more than you, since my ancestors Neanderthal man was in Europe and the Middle East primarily. And my ancestors come from Europe. Of course, your ancestors, if we understand how, that whole out of Africa theory, um, your ancestors left Africa or left their Neanderthal um, relatives much longer ago than mine did. My family was European until about 400 years ago, and then they moved to the United States. They immigrated to the United States. So I have my European genetics are fairly strong, relatively strong, despite the fact that they have been mixing in the United States. We're still mixing with other Europeans. I hope that makes sense. Okay, that's my wife. Just a sec. Hey, Reese, what's up? Reese, hello. Hi. I'm lecturing right now, so I'll just have some chili. Okay, talk to you later. Bye. Researchers have determined that species who have to hunt for their food, such as humans and carnivores, have bigger brains than animals who don't have to search for their food, such as ungulates. And ungulates include all of the deer, the antelope, buffalo. These guys eat grass, so it's a lot easier to find grass than it is a blueberry muffin or bacon or orange juice. The more novel the means of obtaining food, the larger the forebrain of the animal. Magpies have been known to dig up potatoes. House sparrows have been seen picking the insects from car radiator grills. Crows have been known to drop hard palm nuts in front of cars that run over them and open them up. And of course, this is a crow, this is a house sparrow, and this is a magpie. Birds who store food will have a larger hippocampus than birds who don't because they have to remember where they put their food. The hippocampus is necessary for memory, thus, a larger one is needed for those species that rely on memory for survival. Acorn woodpeckers, Clark's nutcracker, and black-capped chickadee all hide their food. And this is the chickadee, and this is Clark's nutcracker, and this is the acorn woodpecker. The differences between the brains of humans and the brains of other mammals are mostly quantitative. Rats and humans are similar in that each has a brain that represents about 2% of the total body weight. The basic differences have mostly to do with the size of the cerebrum of the human and the prominent increase in surface due to the gyri and sulci. And there's a human brains and there's a human brain and there's a rat's brain. You can see how convoluted the human brain is and how smooth the rat's brain is. Rats don't miss out completely. They have a much larger olfactory bulb than humans and so have a much stronger sense of smell. The nervous system of vertebrates have several similarities. They develop from a hollow dorsal neural tube. They show bilateral symmetry. Segmentation is present. Pairs of spinal nerves extend from each level of the spinal cord. The central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system are separate. Localization is present. Certain functions are controlled by certain locations in the central nervous system. Anthropologists and comparative biologists assume that all vertebrates have these features in common because they descended from a common ancestor. Invertebrates are another story. There are 17 phyla to cover the invertebrates, while vertebrates are part of one. It has been estimated that for every human on Earth, there are over 1 billion insects. The basic plan, all vertebrates and most invertebrates share a basic plan that consists of a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. And this is the very complex human with his brain and spinal column and all of his peripheral nerves. And this is a grasshopper. I guess so. There's his brain right there, and he has exactly the same or similar structures. It's just not as complex. All vertebrates and many invertebrates, including mollusks and insects, have brains. The general evolutionary trend in both vertebrates and invertebrates is toward increasing brain control over ganglia at lower levels of the body. And of course, if we were less complex, we would have less things to think about. Would it be simpler? Would we have a happier life? And the answer is probably yes. Axons of mammalians, neurons, are surrounded by myelin, which helps them conduct impulses faster. Invertebrates have no myelin to speed nerve conduction. If we look at present creatures and their fossilized ancestors, we can see that the brain has changed over time, whether it is a bird's brain or a hominid brain. Making a cast of the inside of a skull to map the brain is referred to as an endocast. And here's modern man. There's Homo erectus. There's I can't remember what the A stands for. Anyway, here's a blue jay, and here's a flying reptile. And there's Neanderthal man. As you can see, Neanderthal man actually had a bigger brain than modern man. It's about 250 millimeters larger. Everybody else has smaller brains. But Neanderthal man had a bigger brain. And this is one of the reasons why we can't figure out why in the world did Homo sapien win out over Neanderthal man? I think I know. I have a theory, but it's just a theory, and there's no way of proving my theory. I think Homo sapiens were a lot more aggressive, and because of their aggression, because of their desire to murder, desire to kill, whereas the Neanderthal was a much more relaxed and complacent individual. And there we go. Total brain volume for humans, it's right around 1,252. Rhesus monkey 88, lemur 7.2, tree shrew 3.0. Whoops. And there we go. We're all done. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later. Maybe. There we go.